Our next speaker is Robert Pope. Mr. Pope holds degrees in biology and geology. Was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and has been working in the environmental field over 30 years. Robert has been with the U.S. EPA since '91, and his background is in the fields of groundwater and surface water, chemistry, and project management. He's currently a senior remedial project manager in EPA's Region 4, nearby in Atlanta, Georgia. He has worked on sites throughout the United States, including Alaska and Puerto Rico. He is currently the lead federal regulator for hazardous and radioactive waste cleanup work at the site here. And also Tando Air Force Base and a former chloro-alkali facility in Georgia. With that, Robert.
Hello. I apologize that I'm not Jennifer Edwards. She's a much more pleasant person than I am, so you just have to put up with that. She contacted me a little while ago. I'm out of our Atlanta office and work at SRS on a regular basis, and she's in the D.C. office and EPA headquarters and asked if I could cover this topic for her, and I agreed to do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CERCLA, 5-year reviews under the Superfund process, and how that is done. This is kind of a general presentation, so it's not specific to DOE and certainly not specific to federal facilities in general. I've thrown a few slides to talk about SRS specifics at the very end. So I'll do the introduction and talk about the purpose. And this is really reminders of how to do the reports, which for DOE is done almost completely by your contractors. And issues and recommendations, and how we make protective determinations. Let's see. We have to do technical assessments and write up the issues and recommendations and go into consistent protectiveness statements. So this is really doing the work at the base level, and these things all get put into a database that then gets reported to Congress. DOE has a similar job that they have to do, report theirs to Congress, and so does Department of Defense for their sites. Now, it's important to remember that this only applies to sites that are National Priorities List sites. So DOE has roughly about 13 of them. Places like WIP and Los Alamos, Nevada Test Site, or whatever its new name is, they are not MPL sites, so this would not apply to them. Of course, Hanford, SRS, Oak Ridge, Paducah, Fernald, Mound, places like that are MPL sites. But it's important to remember that this is not all DOE sites, and this is just how we do it. And the reason we do 5-year reviews that I should probably mention here, we're supposed to evaluate the implementation performance of remedies that we've already chosen. So whatever we've chosen to do in a record of decision under the Superfund law, we're supposed to evaluate them. And the way that it's laid out in the regulation is no less than every 5 years is the wording. So they've become a 5-year review because, we're in federal government and we don't want to waste taxpayer money, so we'll go to the maximum, which is 5 years. But the regulation actually says we could do one at 3 years if you wanted to, or 2 years. Just kind of depends. There are 3 kinds. There's statutory 5-year reviews, which means after the amendment to CERCLA was passed, so they're required by the statute. There's policy 5-year reviews, so there's sites where we've decided to do them by policy that the waste was left in place, and those are pretty much before the statute was changed. And then there are just discretionary ones where we think we've left something behind that we want to keep a check on. So another important thing to remember is DOE has about 13 MPL sites. There are over 1,300 MPL sites. So even though DOE has lots of radioactive waste and high-level waste, you guys are like 1% of our workload. So try to remember that sometimes for EPA we're like, yeah, you're just a giant MPL site, but you're one of many. And most of the DOE sites are in remote areas. A lot of them are surrounded by fences, guarded with people with machine guns, right? So we feel like some of their institutional controls are pretty tight compared to a lot of our other MPL sites that are right in the middle of neighborhoods with people that are being exposed to lead today. So we have to look at our world of DOE sites a little differently sometimes, and just like to remind people of that. So this is kind of the process. You're supposed to start. This keeps jumping on me.
Yeah, they complained that they couldn't see the slides
Oh, okay.
on WebEx, so we're trying to fix that.
So you're starting with community involvement and notification whenever you do a 5-year review. So that's something that SRS is really good about. They notify the community they're doing these 5-year reviews. I'm sure the other sites are the same. So this is for units where we've already made a decision on what to do. We look at all the existing older documents. Wow. I think I must have.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to learn how to manage the technology here. Not very good at it. Okay,
I'm just going to play. This is like a video game, so you guys.
Don't worry about the WebEx.
If you guys can make any asteroid-like sounds or Space Invaders.
Sorry, guys, on WebEx. We'll have to post the slides for you guys later. Sorry for this session.
So we go back and look at all the existing documents. Look at any new data, monitoring data. We physically inspect every site. So the folks that work at SRS are they're very tired of the fact that EPA and the state come every 5 years and walk down every single site. SRS, like most of the larger DOE sites, we have 99 operable units the way we break them out for the Superfund, and SRS, I believe, counts them as 515 units. So it takes several days to walk them all down. You're supposed to do community interviews with the site operators, things like that, and assess protectiveness, and then issue a report every 5 years. So you look at working with your community involvement coordinator for general Superfund site, and DOE does the same thing, talking to their external affairs office about how much community involvement they really need. Since all the major DOE sites have advisory boards, site-specific advisory boards, that's usually, we talk to those people because they're engaged with the site. Look at what's happened in the last 5 years, the last 5 years of data, and decide whether or not you are doing what the site's doing, what it's supposed to be doing. And then you might identify other things that are a problem that need to be fixed, but they're not really impacting protectiveness today. So obviously, if we're looking at the last 5 years of data, we're looking at sites where we might have already put in a pump and treat system or an SVE system, or we might just have a cap on that. And we're looking at, all right, what has the cap done in the last 5 years? Has it degraded? Have we had a hurricane named Michael come through and dump 14 inches of rain in 2 days on the cap? Has the cap survived that? This is something EPA has to worry about a lot these days, especially in this region. This is the southeast region. We are Hurricane Central here. And it's something, we have a lot of places we put caps on. We have seen a damage to some of them, but for the most part, they hold up pretty well. So I actually have a cap that I worked on at an Air Force base in Biloxi, Mississippi. It withstood Katrina. It actually was covered by 10 feet of water at one point, but the cap held. We designed it for a Category 3 hurricane, so it was a little better, apparently. But we had to go back and check it. It was damaged. We did have to repair it, but it wasn't completely washed away. So those are things you have to worry about. Every record of decision should have remedial action objectives in it. What was the goal of the action that you decided to take? And so you look at those objectives, you make a technical assessment, and from the data you have, you're able to make a protectiveness determination. So what do we look at? We look at what was the media? Was it sediment in the bottom of a lake? What were the pathways? Was it people who might be collecting fish from that lake, and they're the receptors, although the public in general doesn't like to be called receptors, so if you're dealing with the public, don't use that term. Use people. What are my contaminants of concern? Are they strontium? Are they cesium? Are they something more like trichloroethylene? What are the cleanup levels? Are they levels that were set by regulation, or were they something that we generated out of a risk assessment? Look at what's the land use. That's very important. If you chose an industrial cleanup number and your land use has changed to residential, you might have a problem. because it's 5 years. And unlike a lot of the DOE sites, a lot of these other sites, they sit. We don't check on them every day. There's not someone guarding them with an M16. There's no gate to check in. So it's just a site that's been capped. It's out there with maybe some signs on it. So these land uses do change, and they will change. I know it's very hard to think about that now, but one day when all of the modeling runs out to the end, right, there won't be a DOE monitoring the site. And some of these contaminants that we have on these sites certainly are much more long-lived than the people that carry them M16s at the guard gate. What was the purpose of the action? Were we supposed to eliminate the contaminant or just prevent contact? Were we supposed to minimize the levels? Were we supposed to restore the aquifer to beneficial use? One of EPA's signature terms, it's in our national guidelines and rules. We want to restore aquifers to beneficial use. Well, sometimes that's very difficult with many of these contaminants. They don't come easily out of the aquifer. We may be pumping and treating literally for thousands of years if that's what we decide to do. So, is the remedy functioning as intended by the decision documents? You have a pump and treat system. You generated a capture zone when you designed it and implemented it. Is that capture zone actually still accurate, or is there contamination going past your pumping system and continuing to expand the plume? Well, that means your remedy's not functioning. You built a cap. The cap has withstood the hurricane. Everything seems to be fine. Yes, it's functioning as was intended. Are all your exposure assumptions the same? Is your toxicity data, your cleanup levels, are all those still valid? Has there been a new toxicity analysis that now shows instead of cleaning something up so you should have 25 milligrams of exposure, now you're supposed to get down to 12? Well, that might make you reevaluate what your remedy is and how you're implementing it. And then any other information that's come to light that can call into question the protectiveness of the remedy. So a lot of the old remedies that we built in the 80s and really into the 90s had very little attention to ecological risk. We have been focused on human health for a very long time. And starting in the mid-90s, we started to widen that scope because we are the Environmental Protection Agency, not just the Human Health Protection Agency. So we have started looking at a lot of our older remedies and going, you know what, we never really did a true ecological evaluation here. And that has made us go back and revisit some remedies under this question, actually. So if you find problems, issues, and then recommendations to resolve those issues, we have to put them in a database, which then goes to Congress. So you want to be sure that whatever issues you find and recommendations you're putting in there to address them are real issues with real solutions, because they're going to be tracked, and either you or someone that does your job later in life will be hounded to make sure those things are resolved, as they should be, because we're usually trying to fix issues to protect human health and the environment. Let's see, but if they don't affect current or future protectiveness, maybe we put them under other findings, and we still try to resolve them at a later date. So you should always have a date when you're going to resolve issues. So a weird one that you might not think about. So caps at Savannah River site apparently are very attractive to feral pigs. And they have literally thousands of feral pigs on the 310 square miles, because most of it is open land. Right? The workforce is way reduced from when this place was truly operational. It's about half, maybe. I think in its heyday it was probably over 25,000, and now it's closer to 12. So there's a lot of open land out of there. 2 of the reactors are completely shut down, so there's all that space around those reactors. Pigs just kind of roam, and you can't really hunt them except for certain times of year, which SRS very tightly controls. So pigs will root around in caps. They love landfill caps, apparently. Now, no one was being exposed because the cap infiltration system was still there, but the top 2 feet of topsoil that's supposed to protect that was being impacted. So to us, that was an issue, but not one that really impacted protectiveness, but in the future may have impacted whether the remedy was functioning as proposed. SRS at great expense has gone to a lot of their caps and installed hog fence, something which for most of these remedies, when we thought of them in the 90s, we didn't even think about hogs as a problem, but something you have to do to make that cap last longer. So, issues and recommendations to be actionable, not ongoing. So if you're already addressing the issue, you really shouldn't have to write that one up. And then anything that you find as an issue and recommendation should be supported by information that you actually put in this 5-year review report, which you're going to pull out of monitoring reports or data reports that have come between when you made the decision and the remedy was built and when you did your 5-year review. So these are just some examples out of the actual form that headquarters likes to use. So here's an issue category: remedies still under construction and their residential properties that have not yet been remediated. Lead in soil might be that remedy. So this is a problem that we need to resolve. We need to clean up the rest of those properties. So why might we not have gotten to those properties? Well, does everybody have a great federal budget? Yeah, so part of this becomes a budget issue, right? We need the money to go dig up the soil. But the other strange thing that happens when you're working on people's properties is, can EPA just roll their equipment onto your property and start digging up your front yard? No. So strangely enough, we will go to communities, people will let us sample their yards, we'll find that they have a problem, and somewhere on every project I've ever worked, there's about 10 to 30% of the people that for some reason go, I don't want you to clean up my yard, and I'm not going to give you access. So if we don't have a signed access agreement, we're not going to take that liability onto the federal government of cleaning up their yards. But then we have to note that, hey, we haven't done what we said we would do because we haven't got to all these yards yet. That seems strange, but there are a lot of people that, my shirt has something about a federal agency on it, and they don't want me anywhere near their yard or house. So we run into that. Remedy still under construction. Residents at the properties not yet been remediated are not aware of safety procedures they could do to reduce exposure risks. So the recommendation is to provide educational information to residents. So that's something else we can do, even for residents who don't want us there or that we haven't been able to get to the house yet. We can try to educate them through public availability sessions and public information sessions about things they can do about not eating their soil, not allowing children to play in the yard, things like that. Here's one about monitoring, modifying your O&M plan to make sure you're doing all the monitoring that you should have done. So this is obviously a water site, a surface water sediment and fish sampling were not part of the original monitoring program. And so the recommendation is to change the plan so that we are doing that in the future. But you might have ones that don't really need an action, like your monitoring wells. Well, they're not well secured to the well covers. All right, that's a field thing that you can fix. And this is something that we will note on walkdowns at Savannah River site sometimes. Hey, that monitoring well looks like it might have been hit by the mower. So they'll have to go out and fix that. But that's not something we're going to write up and report to Congress. If my congressman really cares about that, I'm going to be really concerned that he's not doing his job. So you want to keep the things that aren't major issues out of this report. All right, so we have certain protectiveness statements that are recommended by headquarters to use. We want to have one for every single operable unit, which the folks from SRS and I'm sure the other large DOE sites can let you know that that's a kind of a pain, that every single place we go to we're going to say, yes, it's protective, yes, it's protective, yes, it's short-term protective, no, it's not protective. But that's how we want it laid out, so we can be very clear about then making a statement about the whole site if possible. So if everything is currently under control, ecological and human risks, and are anticipated to stay under control, then it's considered protective, and you got to have enough information to show that. If it's currently under control, but there is something that could change in the future, you might say short-term protective. Like if no one has access to the site now, but the fence looks really bad, like it's about to fall apart, you might say this is only a short-term protectiveness, that fence needs to be repaired. If everything's under control and there's no unacceptable risk where the remedy has been implemented, but you're still building it, because some things take a long time to build. One of the landfill caps here at Savannah Riverside is 70 acres. They didn't build that one overnight. It took them quite some time to get it done. We've got an ash site where they burned coal ash for many years here, and that has taken years to get consolidated in CAP, so that's one that we would say is going to be protective, will be protective is the term we use. Maybe you don't have enough information. Maybe, and we've had this happen multiple times, where you had monitoring ongoing, but for some reason there was a contracting problem, or when they went out to sample the wells were no longer sampleable, they had collapsed or something like that, and they were only supposed to sample once in year 4, right before the 5-year review. You don't have enough information at the 5th year to actually make a determination. So you defer it, knowing that you have to go out there and get those wells fixed or drill new wells and then make a decision. And then the one that we don't want to see is that risks are not currently under control. Say we have a landfill cap and it's clearly breached and it has not been repaired, and we can see waste actually being exposed, and people could have access to that landfill. We would say that is not protective. So these are some example protective statements. However, unless you're going to write one of these documents, I don't want to bore you with them. So all this, of course, is on EPA's website, under the Superfund 5-year review website. You can look for the guidance, how you can write 5-year reviews. There's a template available in PDF and Word. You can search for ones that already exist online for private sites as well as federal facilities. The FYR page is the Federal Facility 5-year review page. Other useful sites: groundwater vapor intrusion, talking about contaminants, regional screening levels, and drinking water MCLs. So earlier, I think the 2 presentations ago, we talked a little bit about exit strategies. EPA actually has written a groundwater exit strategy. If you want to cry one day about how hard it is to get out of a groundwater site, feel free to go read that strategy. It is our guidance, though. One of the things it says is if you set remedial goals, say you wanted to get to the MCL of 5, and that was your goal, that every well that you're monitoring in that system has to be at that goal or below for 8 rounds of monitoring. That's the groundwater exit strategy. Only applies to Superfund MPL sites. Does not apply to RCRA sites, does not apply to NRC sites. That's just EPA's groundwater exit strategy. What we were very careful to not do is say, and that has to be quarterly monitoring, or it has to be annual monitoring, or it has to be every 5-year monitoring. So that is something you can decide. If you're getting close to that and you're a small site, you may say, hey, let's go out there and do it monthly for 8 times and see if it changes. And see if EPA and the state will agree with that. Usually we want to see seasonal changes, so we like to see quarterly sampling, but maybe a monthly is appropriate at your site. Weekly, I think you could try, unlikely. Daily, I'm pretty sure we would reject that, but you could try it. So there are some things for exit strategy written for groundwater. I think that one's a very tough one to get through, actually, because it's so common that we get down to our goal, but we're bouncing around, within 10 to 20% of it on a couple of wells. So. All right, so a little bit about SRS folks. SRS folks that have been around a little while will probably remember this little picture fondly. This is one of the first things I saw coming on site was this little picture. But these are just some of the SRS sites that are in 5-year review status. P area and R area are reactor areas. F and H area are where there were canyons and there are tank farms there. The tank farms themselves, the high-level waste tank farms. E area, which is the low-level waste disposal area here at Savannah River site, is in 5-year review status for some caps they have put on it. K area and L area, they're reactor areas, but they're groundwater. And in K area, there's been a couple of outlying areas that have been addressed, and so those are in 5-year review status. Lower 3 runs is their lake. Parr Pond is in there, and a stream system that comes out of it. T area I'm going to talk about a little bit more, and this is old T area, which was called TNX back in the day, that is in 5-year review status. So just some lists that are already there. It's not even a comprehensive list. And here is what became T area, which was called TNX. Operational facility in this picture, undergoing remediation in this picture, which included deactivation, decommissioning of the buildings, and basically taking them all down to the slab. And in this site, lots of things have been done over the years, groundwater cleanup as well as soil addressed and radioactively contaminated concrete addressed right here. Some of it removed, some of it left in place, but eventually a big cap was built on it. However, there's still groundwater treatment ongoing at this site. There's still contaminated groundwater underneath the site. And what we call land use controls, which are a combination of the engineering controls of the cap and the fence around the whole site, and site controls that SRS has, as well as institutional controls. Here's another one that's in 5-year review. This is an aerial photo of P reactor, and the entire building is sealed up. Much of it extends 40 feet underground, 45 feet underground roughly, and it has been grouted up all the way to the ground surface. And certain pieces of the building have then also had grout added to them. This large flat thing over here was the disassembly basin where the entire building was taken down, and the basin itself was emptied of water, tritiated water, and then completely filled with grout. So I don't know if you guys will get to see this on a tour. Well, no, they don't get to see it. Nothing interesting, huh? And then other little things that that we worked into as we did this. You'll notice a lot of these tops look like new concrete. So that's to give a slant to the roof. So why would you want a slant to the roof? Well, they're all flat roofs. So all they do is collect water, which is going to make its way into the building. No matter how good the concrete is and how much we seal it up, it will go. But if you slant the roofs and then you notch all the walls, the water runs off of it like a duck's back and down to the bottom of the building. And you'll notice at the base of the building, there's a strange gray line there. Well, that is a line of riprap, so that when the water comes down, it doesn't undermine the wall of the building. It hits the riprap and splashes out. A lesson learned by the Corps of Engineers during Katrina, where their walls were not lined with riprap, and when the water overtopped the walls and the canals, it actually weakened the foundation, made this soil go liquid, and the wall just moved in one solid piece. So these little things have been done. It's part of in situ decommissioning, but they were all in a CERCLA record of decision. And so we check every 5 years to make sure the building's still sealed up, that everything still looks good. I try to get out once every 5 years and purposely walk up and down on the disassembly basin, even do jumping jacks on it to make sure the concrete's still sound. It seems to be fine. Here's the other reactor that has been fully addressed, which is our area. You can see it had very similar actions done to it with sloped roofs added. You can see the walls are notched. You can see where the water is making a line as it's draining down the walls. And its disassembly basin is also flat. So a lot of what we do are institutional controls, or we might even call signs engineering controls and fences. So what do you have to do with things like that? This is a part of the site that is actually beyond the major site boundary and goes along Lower Three Runs Creek, which runs off the site and is crossed by public roads, as well as railroad bridges and power line accesses. And so it's posted no trespassing. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, chemical or radioactive contaminants may be present, unauthorized entry prohibited. You would think that would be sufficient to most adults with a high school education. But people don't like it that they can't fish, so occasionally signs are vandalized, and we find the record of what they were vandalized with there next to the sign. So we go through occasionally, and SRS sends out their patrols occasionally to make sure the gates are still locked, that the signs still exist there on the fences and on the post, and trying to keep people away. So these are the things that you do in a 5-year review. If we come through these areas at the 5-year review inspection stage and the gates aren't locked, we're going to turn to SRS and say, get your gates locked. If the fence is torn down, and we've done this multiple times where we've seen trees fall on the fence, and when we see that and our SRS sees it and the state sees it, they'll say, all right, we got to get that fence fixed. And these are the things you do long-term to keep remedies safe. So what's the danger with this creek? It has cesium-137 in certain portions of it. The highest concentrations, we did take an action, and SRS got it all excavated out. But there is some remaining cesium-137 there that makes it so we wouldn't want anybody to live in it and roll around in it on a daily basis. So that's why the signs are still up. All right, questions? So this is a very down at the working level presentation of how we do it.
Thank you, Robert.
Sure.
Let's limit to one question, please. Anyone? Yeah, Brad.
I think P reactor's groundwater is about, Will, you might have to help me, about 70 feet down? 50, only 50 feet down? So the bottom of the building goes down to about 40, 45 feet in its lowest spot, and the groundwater is about 50 feet down.
Okay, 50 feet.
50, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ours much more shallow. Ours around 10 to 15, yeah, 10.
All right, thank you, Robert. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.